What's up, Bucs fans? Back with another edition of Pirate Parlay here on the Sick Podcast Network. We just had a great episode earlier this week with Logan Hall, defensive end for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now we're back at it with Behind the Enemy Line, scouting the opponent. We know this opponent pretty good. It's the Buccaneers, one of their rivals in the division, the Atlanta Falcons. A lot of stake on the line in this game. The first place in the division goes to the winner. If the Bucs lose, they're 2 games back. So this is a must-win game for the Bucs to keep their NFC South hopes alive with a difficult schedule coming up. They've got the Packers, who are playing really well. They've got the Jaguars. Then they also have to play the Saints again as well. So big win, must win on the line for the Buccaneers. We'll find out a little bit more about this Atlanta Falcons. What's changed since the last time these two teams went head to head, and we'll get to that on the other side of the break.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to the Sick Podcast. Pirate Parlay.
Battle intercepted, picked off in the end zone. Bucs are going to beat the Chiefs. We're the champions of the world.
The sickest Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. It's going to be sick.
We're back here on the other side of the break here. We're going to bring in a special guest. We've got Will McFadden, writer for the Falcoholics and co-host of the Believe in Falcons podcast. We had him on early in the season. We went back and forth. Obviously, I picked the Bucs to win. He picked the Falcons to win, and he came out on the better hand in that. But it was a closer game than many expected, I think. And if not for 2 turnovers and some really bad blown assignments, I think the Bucs could have came away with that one. But coulda, woulda, shoulda. That's what they say. And the Buccaneers didn't. They fell to the Falcons and put themselves in a scenario and then went on to lose a lot more games following that. 4 more games down the stretch, only winning 2 of them. But this is a playoff game for them. This is a must-win for game. You got to win this game to control the NFC South. And the Falcons right now are doing everything they can to keep that first-place lead in the NFC South. So it's been a long while since these two teams faced. I think it was week 7. They were in Tampa Bay. Now they're in Atlanta in the Thunderdome. Maybe Ludacris will be swinging from the rafters. Who knows? But Will, talk to us. What's the biggest difference between this team in week 7 and this team right now?
Well, first, thanks for having me back on. It's a pleasure to talk this matchup. But yeah, I mean, it's funny that you say, you point to the kind of missed opportunities for Tampa in that game, because I think a lot of people here in Atlanta would look back at that game as kind of emblematic of how the season has gone, which is to say that it could have been a blowout victory for Atlanta had the Falcons not shot themselves in the foot kind of multiple times, right? They fumbled 3 times, twice literally at the 1-yard line. Antoine Winfield's strip is still one of my favorite plays of the season, even though it came against the Falcons. It was just so cool. So when you ask kind of what's different about this Falcons team, I know we'll get into injuries in a second, and that is kind of the tangible difference. But really, the Falcons have kind of been searching for that offensive performance that they turned in against Tampa Bay really since that game. That should have been a little bit of a turning point, I think, on the season for Atlanta's offense. And unfortunately, the turnovers and then the turnovers kind of the week after that as well have told the story of Atlanta's offense this season. And that kind of led to Desmond Ritter's benching and everything went from there. But it's really clearly, you can look back at this Tampa game as a little bit of a sliding doors moment. So the Falcons since then have been kind of searching for that identity. Now the defense is, I think, still right there, as good as they have been. And maybe if you had told me, did I expect that to continue throughout the rest of the season? At the time, I might have said no, but that's hard to say that it's different. So this team really is not different too much. It's just that they're looking for the performance offensively that they had against Tampa Bay. Who knows? Maybe it'll come again this week, but they haven't really had another game where it seems like they're clicking like they did in Tampa that day.
Yeah, you look at it, the Bucs are still searching for their signature win, their own explosiveness on offense, their ability to shut a team down to, less than 18 points and for the offense to really explode. They had that one game where they put up 27 points and lost, but they're looking for, okay, we need a signature win. And I'm sure they're right in the same boat. Would love for it to happen against the Falcons. But, you talk about you know, and I want to get into the defense a little bit later, but you talk about the benching of Desmond Ridder. He sat for 2 games. They bring in I think it was 2 games, Taylor Heineke to come in and kind of be the guy and kind of flounder a little bit. But what has that done for Ridder to be able to have that sense of demotion? Obviously came on the heels of an injury. You never like to lose your job, you know, from an injury, but essentially that's what happened until they're like, well, Heineke, he was making me want to have a Heineken after every game. We need to try to get Ridder back in there. But how have you sensed that he's grown from that experience?
You know, it's really funny because he was asked that question after the Saints game, which obviously, you know, if you're talking about signature wins, I think that the Falcons could really point to that Saints game as one of their signature wins on the season. But he was asked kind of like, all right, what did you learn from your 2 games being a backup and sitting there and watching it from the sidelines and getting that different perspective? And I didn't really think his answer was a very good one. He said that he learned how to be a backup. And I was like, is that the takeaway? Is that the takeaway that you want for your young quarterback? And so I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. Yeah. I'm like, you don't want to, that shouldn't be your take. Like, cool. I've learned how to now have a long career as a backup in the NFL. Like, he then expanded upon that. And he said he just learned the appreciation really of just having to be prepared at any moment and still kind of needing to know everything as though you are the starter, which is a real thing. I mean, that is why a lot of teams value kind of these same guys that you see popping up, like it was Josh McCown forever, Matt Schaub. Like we see these guys because they're so good in the classroom and they're so good at handling their business and being ready to go at the drop of the hat. So I think that that's kind of what he was getting at, is maybe the preparation skills, but that was always a strength of Desmond Ridder. If anything, I think we've seen since he's come back, the Falcons have almost gone back to having him be in that game manager role, which he was in to start the season, and kind of starting with the Tampa Bay game and a little bit before that. But really that was the first one where it felt like they were expanding their passing game and really starting to put more on the passing game as opposed to the run game. And that is when they started getting in trouble with these turnovers and with some of these just really momentum killing types of drives and plays. And that is not what Arthur Smith wants. He wants to, you know, really wear you down, but play efficient football and sustain these drives and play mistake-free ball. So I think you're seeing them take it a little bit more out of the hands of Desmond Ridder recently. And that obviously comes with more touches for Bijan Robinson, who I could have easily just answered your first question saying what's different with Bijan Robinson, because we all remember that he had kind of that mysterious illness and barely played in that Tampa Bay game. So you guys are going to see a lot of Bijan Robinson in this one because he is becoming that bell cow for Atlanta. You're still going to see Tyler Algier and Cordero Patterson. And so I know that's a long roundabout way to answer your Desmond Ridder question. I think they've taken it a little bit more out of his hands than kind of said, okay, you're fixed after 2 weeks. It's still very much a work in progress for him.
You talk about Bijan Robinson obviously getting, you know, not playing at all in that game. That's a huge difference, right? But just his expansion into the offense, we always knew they were trying to do this positionless type of, you know, group there with London be able to play, you know, inside, outside, with Pitts being able to line up all over the place. And then obviously the ultimate coup d'etat was getting Bijan Robinson, who can line up pretty much anywhere on the field. How have they been using him mostly? How has he looked in? And obviously we know he's got the wheels and the jukes to make people puke on the sideline, but how has he really been? And do you think he's got that bell cow ability in him?
It's interesting, and I'm really curious to see if Vita Vea is in this game or not, and how that impacts him, because he has had a lot of touches in certainly since the bye week. You know, I believe he had 17 carries last weekend against a really good New York Jets run defense, but primarily the Falcons have used him on a lot of outside zone and stretch runs and on the perimeter, and so it's almost become a little bit telltale when he comes into the game as opposed to a Tyler Algier or Cordero Patterson. And with those guys, they're a little bit more apt to run it between the tackles. That's not to say that they won't with Bijan. It's just something I've noticed where most of the time he's in, you're going to get him attacking the perimeter, which makes sense. He's elusive. He's fast. Get him out there in space and let him do his best. But I also kind of think his elusiveness would be really effective inside of the tackles as well. So again, that's something where I'll be curious to see if Tampa Bay is picking up on that as well, and if that is a little bit of a tendency that is forming. But in terms of him as a receiver, that is where it's really been interesting to kind of watch it all play out and unfold this season, because initially I thought that he was going to be this running back who lines up all over the field, right? And kind of can run a route from the slot, or maybe you put him in the outside and he just does all of this different stuff. And he can do that at times, but really what I've noticed is almost more what the Panthers did with Christian McCaffrey when he was a rookie, which is have him just run a bunch of different routes from the backfield. And that's interesting. I think it's a little bit, simpler on the running back, but also it takes a rare athlete to be able to, run the type of almost speed wheel that we saw Bijan Robinson run against the Saints when he caught that touchdown pass late in the game. And then they'll turn that into an option route. They can turn that into a standard kind of angle or K route out of the backfield. He just does so much from the backfield. And I have to imagine that's part of the design. That's not to say that he won't be in the slot at times or, split out with another back in the backfield, but he does a lot of damage from back there. So, I'm curious just to, again, see if that is something that continues to happen, but it is something I've noticed. So, he is their bell cow. I think that he will continue to be that, if not see his usage increase, where most rookies hit a rookie wall. Like I think they've managed his workload pretty smartly throughout the season, and they should be able to ride him kind of down this playoff stretch, hopefully.
Yeah. There's a lot of nuances to playing slot and outside, and for running back, especially a rookie running back, it's something that you throw him out there here and there, but you got to ease him into before you can really play that spot. But
keeping him in the backfield also helps. And I should have mentioned just pass protection. And that is something where Bijan's game as a rookie is really kind of advanced. So that's another aspect, is just leaving him in there with that option.
Right. And talking about Bijan too, you just mentioned, he's not often running in between the tackles. And when they do use him on those speed wheel routes and stuff, it takes a rare type of athlete to keep up with him, to be able to chase him down, to be able to cover him in that. And not that he's great in coverage, but let's just hop into the injury report now, because in the Bucs side, that's two of their top players. If you want to call Devin White a top player, call him what he is, but he certainly is fast enough to keep up with guys, and certainly fast enough to chase down guys. Might not always take the right angle in the tackle or be in the right place in coverage, but speed on the outside at a linebacker position, who's going to be mostly lined up on the running back. That's Devin White. Big body in the middle who can prevent guys from, running up there with comfortability and with consistent success. That's Vita Vea. Both of these guys have missed 2 straight days of practice. Vita Vea with a toe injury, Devin White with a foot injury on the Buccaneers side. Another guy who did not practice at all so far this week is Jamel Dean, who's dealing with an ankle and foot injury. A lot of foot injuries on this team. Pretty much everybody else is in some sort of full or limited participation and look good to go. But those are 3 big pieces on the defensive side. Levante back up the full participation, so that's a good one. But he's going to have his hands full with Kyle Pitts and Jonnu Smith. So you're going to be relying on probably rookie Savassi Dennis. That's going to see a lot of work against Bijan Robinson. But Vita Vea, Devin White, Jamel Dean out, that's a huge blow to this Bucs defense. And the Atlanta Falcons, if Arthur Smith is smart enough, he's going to try to capitalize on that with the things that you just said, and utilizing Bijan in those ways. On the Falcons side, talk to me about their injuries and what you're hearing about against guys potentially playing. Tomorrow is the day. We've seen it all year. Guys don't practice Wednesday. Guys don't practice Thursday. They get that walkthrough practice in Friday, and they're good to go, or at least a game time decision. Who falls into that category? Who's going to be out likely? What's that trending?
Yeah. So I guess I can start with the positive news. Most of the season, Atlanta has been really, really solid with the injury report, and some weeks have had just nobody on it for like multiple weeks in a row. That is not the case right now. But positive is that Mac Hollins looks like after missing a couple of games, he is going to be back. He's been dealing with an ankle injury. So that could be, Jamel Dean being out. If he is out, something that the Falcons kind of attack the perimeter a little bit with Mac Hollins, with Drake London, Van Jefferson, those guys. And then Mike Hughes, their corner. So I'll get to it right now. So AJ Terrell in the concussion protocol, there's a chance he's been limited the last 2 days of practice. So that's always a good sign, but the concussion protocol is so tricky that it's really hard to make a call one way or the other. But obviously the Falcons would like to have AJ Terrell, even though Mike Evans usually has a pretty successful outing against AJ Terrell. Still always a fun matchup. But Jeff Okudah was a limited participant on Wednesday. He was downgraded today and did not participate. So he is dealing with an ankle injury. So potentially the Falcons could be without their top two corners. Mike Hughes, who is part of that secondary depth, was a full participant and has kind of missed the last couple of games with Mac Hollins. So that's some good news, but still you would like to see Terrell and Jeff Okudah. Another limited participant, although this is an upgrade from Wednesday's status, is Drew Dahlman. So talking about Vita Vea, the Falcons, are dealing with an injury to their starting center. And that's something I think that was new. Like I didn't notice him come out of the previous game, but right. He obviously is struggling with an ankle injury. But if I had to guess, I would lean towards Drew Dahlman suiting up for this one. Another lineman, though, the Falcons could be down is Caleb McGarry, who left the game with a knee injury kind of in the second quarter there. And against the Saints, I should say, and really just kind of has struggled to get back. So he did not participate the last couple of days with a knee injury. And then two more defensive injuries that could be huge. Nate Landman, David Onyemata have not practiced this week. They both are Landman's dealing with a knee and David Onyemata is dealing with an ankle injury. But the Falcons already down Grady Jarrett. Definitely don't want to be down David Onyemata when now it looks like the Buccaneers have finally realized that Rachaad White can run the football a little bit. So yeah, the Falcons are dealing with a lot of injuries of their own. Could potentially be down two starting corners, one of their starting linebackers, a starting defensive tackle, potentially two starting offensive linemen. So I don't think it'll be that bad for Atlanta, but it could be, a rough week injury wise.
Yeah, especially you look at a guy like David Onyemata. I'm just looking up the stats, but he had himself a game against the Bucs in week 7. I had him here. Yeah, he had 6 pressures, 3 quarterback hits, and a late sack, against the Bucs. And that was, against working a lot against Cody Mauch. So that would be a big loss. Obviously, down cornerbacks, especially in this league. Godwin is banged up. That's been well documented, but Evans seems like he's healthiest as he's ever been.
He's so good.
Right. So, I mean, if you're dealing with, an ankle injury for Okudah is tough. Mike Hughes, a hand is, it's different. Maybe it might, affect, some press man on the line, but with Okudah dealing with that ankle injury, if they can get Evans lined up on him, because he's not going to be 100% ready, that's something that they'll probably look to exploit. But yeah, I mean, both these teams, we're in the home stretch. No team is really 100% right now at this point. So injuries are definitely going to play a part of it. And I think from the Bucs standpoint, their defense has regressed. Let's just put it how it is over the last, since the bye week, really. And not being able to have those guys, especially a guy like Vita Vea. I mean, that's a huge one. I think you can get away. Zion McCollum has played good enough filling in for Jamel Dean, I feel like. And I feel like Servassier Dennis, I want to get a look at him anyways, because I don't think Devin White's going to be here. So I would love to see what Servassier Dennis and Levante David look like on the field next to each other, potential pairing for next year. But Vita Vea, I think, would be a huge loss for this Bucs team, especially against a team where you know what they're going to do. They're going to run the ball. I mean, if you look at what the Falcons are right now, I mean, they are not great passing, but they're a heck of a team when they're running the ball. Nothing's really changed. They're 6th in the league in rushing yards, 22nd in the league in passing yards. They're not scoring a ton. So that's something that you can, kind of take advantage. Only scoring 18.8 points a game. So, but that rushing attack is vaunted. I mean, and they're right in the middle of the pack at 15th with time of possession, about just over 30 minutes, 14 seconds. So, but I think if you get Vita Vea back, that will help. They've got some guys there who, in a Greg Gaines who can slow you down, but nobody like Vita Vea. Absolutely not. But I want to jump over to the defensive side of the ball, because you look at the defense, and if you just look at it at a glance, you're like, wow, 7th in points allowed, 10th in yards per game, 11th in passing yards, 15th in rushing yards. Those are all really good stats. I mean, they are one of the top defenses in the league by those metrics. Still struggling to get sacks, 24th in the league. Still struggling to get turnovers. Jesse Bates is a machine, but no one else can do it. Someone else has got to put their hand in the jar too. He's got 5 of their 7 interceptions. But how much of that defense and those numbers are inflated? And it's not the Falcons' fault. Let's just put it out there. They don't make the schedule. But how much of the Falcons' defense is legit, especially their numbers, versus how much they've just gone against some really bad football teams?
I think that there is something to that, right? You're not playing the Eagles, you're not playing the Cowboys, you're not playing the Bills, you're not playing the Chargers. Like, these are not the, groundbreaking offenses in the league. But I think what is more telling are some of the situational stats. Like, Atlanta is, I want to say, the second best team in terms of EPA on third down defensively. And I believe they have one of the very best conversion rates allowed on defense on third down. And that's something that has allowed them to really limit opposing offenses. They get off the field, whether they're doing it with a turnover, with a sack, or by just playing really good fundamental, run to the ball, limit yards after catch defense. And instead of being in 2nd and 4, a lot of teams are in 2nd and 8 against Atlanta. And they just kind of make you have to earn every little bit of yardage. So I do think that is sustainable. It's a harder way, I think, to live. But as long as you don't suffer a bunch of these injuries all at once, where now you've got some of these maybe less talented, but maybe less disciplined or younger, just inexperienced, those types of guys, that I could see starting to really impact Atlanta's defense if it all happens at once. But this has been a veteran group. This is a group filled with guys like Calais Campbell and Bud Dupree and Lorenzo Carter and Jesse Bates and David Onyema, veteran guys. So that's kind of what I've seen and why I think they're playing good defense. It's situational. It's chancy. Jesse Bates making a great play. He could have been burned if Derek Carr does decide to go somewhere else or just hang on the ball a tick longer, but they are making these impact plays. The area where I think Atlanta has gotten lucky, and maybe in a different world, we would say that this is a big weakness. It's just that they have not been exposed yet, either because a team has not hit this opportunity, or they have, maybe been bailed out. And that's the explosive pass. And we saw it in the first matchup of these two teams, right? Mike Evans, deep touchdown. They have given up chunk plays. I want to say they're 15th in the league right now in kind of explosive plays allowed through the air. And that is something where just the eye test, it passes. You see a few times a game, somebody kind of left wide open in zone where the linebacker is too slow to catch up. And again, maybe a quarterback has overthrown it. Maybe the receiver has dropped it. A few times the Falcons have just decided to eat a pass interference penalty instead of give up a deep touchdown. So that is an element. And I know that's something that the Bucs are more than capable of kind of taking advantage of. So that could be a little bit of an equalizer for as well as Atlanta's defense has played. If you can hit some of these explosive passes and maybe get a deeper touchdown or two and get some of those easier points instead of having to fight your way down the field, kind of like the Saints did, and then get in the red zone and then come up empty every single time. If Tampa can do that and put the pressure on Atlanta's offense, that's definitely a pathway to victory.
A couple more things and we'll wrap it up here. But as far as the Falcons, you look at the remaining schedule, they've got the Bucs, and this is going to determine the winner or the division lead right now. And then they got Carolina. Meanwhile, the Bucs play Green Bay. Then they've got Indianapolis with Gardner Minshew, who looked great and then fell apart when he played the Bucs. The Bucs have the Jaguars. Then you go to the next game, and you guys got Chicago. The Bucs got the Saints, and then they finish out of the Panthers. You guys finish out of the Saints. But what is the level of optimism that even if you guys drop this game, that there's still a path to the NFC South divisional title? And on top of that, is it something fans even want? I know it's been a while since the Falcons have made the playoffs, but at 5-7, I mean, I think they're in the playoffs right now. They're got the 19th pick because they're that final team, right? If we were to end the season today and they were to lose in the playoffs, but if they don't have that division, they're in the top 10. They're picking top 10, and where it looks like there's a potential need for a quarterback and maybe a new head coach. Well, I'll ask you about that afterwards. But what is the feeling of optimism that, hey, we can, even if we lose this game, there's still a path there? And do fans even want that?
Yes, fans do want that. I mean, Falcons have picked
to get snacked 10. By the Eagles or the
yeah, but who cares? I mean, you get back to the postseason for the first time since 2017. I mean, that matters when you haven't been there. Like, sorry that they haven't won a Super Bowl in the last 4 years, but the Falcons want to get back, and fans, again, like you've drafted Kyle Pitts, you've drafted Drake London, you've drafted Bijan Robinson. Like, these coming out of each draft class were Drake London maybe aside, like Kyle Pitts and Bijan Robinson were two of the crown jewels of their two respective draft classes. Like, that is an experience that Falcons fans have had much more recently than going into the postseason. And so I think that fans are cautiously optimistic as they are kind of, I think, going into each game. Like, there's really been a lack of consistency with the Falcons, certainly offensively, that has just left a lot of people being like, I don't know what to expect in any single game. We expect
feel that over here.
Yeah, close and down to the wire. But is it going to be a gut-wrenching loss? Is it going to be a head-scratching loss? Is it going to be an eke-it-out win? Like, anything's on the table. And so I think for that reason, everybody's just kind of taking it game by game. Now, there was a point going into the bye week after the Falcons had lost 3 in a row where people were starting to turn their attention to the draft, but it was more, I think, anger and frustration than like, all right, let's turn in the towel or throw in the towel. Let's just look ahead to the draft and let's do it, because that's how it's been the last couple of years. So to see this team win 2 more, and now really they're 3-0 in the division, that is the key for Atlanta. So you talk about this game specifically. If the Falcons win this game, they have an 85% chance to make the playoffs based on the New York Times kind of prediction model. Yeah. If they lose this game, they have a 35% chance, which, is still a decent amount. And it speaks to the fact that the Falcons have an easier road. They have already played Green Bay, but they got them in week 2 before Jordan Love became this version. And so they beat Green Bay. They do have the Panthers. They've got the Bears. Indy is probably the hardest team left on the schedule, and that's an out-of-conference game, so it doesn't hurt you that much. And, I think that the Falcons, even if they lose this game, if they beat the Panthers and the Saints, they have to like where they're at. So for that reason, I think a lot of fans will feel much more optimistic, maybe with a win on Sunday, because if that happens, you're sitting very pretty in terms of the postseason. But definitely at this point, not looking ahead of the draft. And at this point, honestly, like, not even really thinking you're out of the woods, because as much as the Falcons have won the last 2 games, last weekend was ugly, and the Saints game could have gone entirely differently if they had just been able to do something in the red zone. So it's a cautious optimism, but they certainly would love to be back in the playoffs, even if it means a 48-7 loss to like Dallas in round 1.
So let's say flip the other side. They don't make the playoffs. What's the future looking like for Arthur Smith? And have you heard any rumblings from, obviously fans, but, front office, maybe, sources, that if they don't win this, they don't make the playoffs, that they're probably in the market for a quarterback. Maybe go after the guy that they probably should have taken to begin with. You know where I'm going with this, and Justin Fields.
Yeah, I mean that is definitely something that has been talked about a lot here in Atlanta. Certainly because Justin Fields is a homegrown kid. The Falcons, yeah, a lot of interest in him coming out of the draft. He made no bones about he would be down to play for the Falcons if that was the team that picked him. I think that if the Falcons do not make the playoffs, I would expect Arthur Smith to get one more year. Certainly next year would be the hot seat year, but what I think a lot of people nationally kind of fail to fully grasp is just how dire the Falcons kind of situation was that they walked into, that Arthur Smith and Terry Fontenot walked into, and just kind of the cleanup job they had to do to even
Matt
really
Ryan
get to
contract, the Julio contract.
Yeah, I mean,
The Bucs
exactly.
are going
And
through it right now with Bowles, right? The first year he was given the team April 30th. Can't do anything.
yeah,
You're not even like really involved in draft prep. You've made your defensive contributions, and then you go to the next year and he's hit with the $35 million dead cap hit from Brady and all the other players that they went all in, and 40% of your cap is gone. So there's that case to be made for like he's never had a fair shake. And I think Arthur Smith, this is year one of his fair shake, right?
it is. But what is mostly concerning, and the reason why I think you are hearing because everybody here in Atlanta understood that, right? Some were more willing to buy into year 3 really being year 1 than others. I mean, year 3 was always circled as, okay, we at least expect you to make the playoffs because you should have a culture established. You should, at that point be able to bring in the players you need. And they did defensively. And I think it's a big testament to this offseason and to the regime and the plan in place that they kind of transformed their defense in one offseason when they finally had the money to do so. You look at their biggest acquisition, Jesse Bates. That is a grand slam acquisition at this point. If we're looking at this, he looks like an all-pro safety right now. So that is great. What is Arthur Smith in kind of a little bit of hot water is the fact that the offense has been the issue, and the fact that you have spent your 3 top 10 picks on offensive weapons. Kyle Pitts is kind of like a punchline around the league at this point for his usage. Drake London is a very good receiver. He's a little bit Mike Evans light, still in his second year. We'll see what he develops into, but he looks like at least a good draft pick, worthy of, the number 8 pick. I don't know. Maybe that's a little rich, but again, he's not an issue. But Bijan Robinson is very fun. I think that's awesome. We can have the running back debate, but whatever. It's just the fact that the offense has never clicked or gelled, that even though this is a little bit of a year 1, if the offense is what keeps them out of the playoffs in a very winnable division, that is where I think you really start to have those questions about Arthur Smith and especially quarterback. And so at that point, I wonder if mandates come down at any point, if
owners are emotional.
Yeah, right. Now, whether that's for a Justin Fields or if it's hey, we'll let you get your pick of quarterback, but it's got to be, you got to go get a first round quarterback or have a very good reason for taking one in the second, right? But we need a guy, and this is your last chance. That's kind of how I would expect it to play out if they end up missing the postseason. And even if they make it a postseason, it may not then be mandates and all of that stuff, but I think you might see a different quarterback. Unless Desmond Ridder really turns it around over the last few weeks, even a playoff run may not be enough to just lock him in as the starter next year.
It's difficult too, because the quarterback landscape, you know how it goes. If you got one, you don't let him go. And pretty much the only guy on the market next year is Kirk Cousins, coming off an Achilles at like 34 years old. And the Vikings have already been open about wanting to have him back, especially Kevin O'Connell, been very vocal about that. So, your options are, well, the Bears, do they get the first overall pick, and do they want Caleb Williams? Well, that means Justin Fields might be available. You look around the landscape of the league, and no one's trading for Mac Jones. I'll tell you that. Kyler Murray, let's say the Cardinals get number 2. Do they want Drake May, or do they stick with Kyler Murray? That's a big debate there. But other than that, I mean, you're looking at Baker back on the market potentially, and the Josh Dobbs, the passionate, so like there's not much out there and available. So, you look to the draft, yeah, maybe, especially if they made it to the playoffs and they lose that first game, 19, you're looking at maybe a Bo Nix, a Michael Penix. I don't think Daniels falls that far. I don't think he gets out of the top 15. Obviously, Caleb and Williams will be gone. Do you try to get one of those guys there? Do you hope maybe one of them falls to the second round, pick 19? That's a gamble. They're kind of like the Bucs, right? They're kind of in no man's land. You kind of ride what you have, or maybe you make a deal for Justin Fields if he becomes available. Other than that, you're kind of left holding the bucket because you're not bad enough, to be in the high enough in the top 10 to get one of these guys, but you're not good enough. And there's no good quarterbacks either. So. But let's get down to score predictions right here. We'll wrap it up here. Give me your thoughts on this game. Score predictions. What do you think likely happens, offensive, defensively, and then what's your score at?
Yeah, I think Atlanta is, especially if Vita Vea is out, but even if he's not, I think they will be able to establish the run a little bit more than they were. I mean, it was the run game kind of early, I think, that Atlanta got going against Tampa Bay, and then certainly the inside run. I mean, Tyler Algier, Cordero Patterson, that was by far kind of, I think, their best games because Bijan was out. But I would expect you to see a little bit more variation in the run game, but they are, I believe, going to really stick with that. And then I think that's where you'll see, a Jonnu Smith get involved over the middle. Kyle Pitts had, at least a solid game last week. So maybe he's in the mix a little bit more. And then maybe one or two of those deep shots kind of down the sideline, especially if Jamel Dean is out. Defensively for Atlanta, I wondered, did they just straight up double team Mike Evans? Do they just shadow him with a Richie Grant or, Jesse Bates, even though he's so good in the middle of the field? And then I think you'll see a lot of the simulated pressures against Baker, try to maybe get him to see some things, get him out of the pocket. Even though he likes to do that, I think they stand a better chance of just kind of getting Baker to be a little bit hero ballish at times and maybe throw some of those picks, as opposed to dropping a lot of guys into coverage. Because Baker at this point, I think, is good enough, and his receivers, Mike Evans, is good enough. Like, you can find those holes if you give him time. And Atlanta's pass rush is not so good individually because it is a little long in the tooth. So that's maybe how I would see special teams could be a big factor in this game. It's kind of been a little bit of an Achilles heel for Atlanta this season, and certainly the last couple of weeks. But that being said, I think the X factor will be the fact that Atlanta is at home. When they played the Saints, it was an atmosphere not at all like I expected. It was coming off of Thanksgiving. It was kind of a cold, dreary, gray. It looked like The Walking Dead outside, and it felt like The Walking Dead inside about 45 minutes before kickoff. And I was talking to the reporter who covers Falcons for ESPN, and we were just like, man, if there's no crowd in here today, if everybody's still Thanksgiving and whatnot, and the team sleepwalks out of the bye week and loses to the Saints, like, the season's over. Instead, so many people were in the building. It was kind of the 50th anniversary of hip hop in the South celebration that Atlanta was doing. That's when Ludacris rappelled down the
not
thing.
Even fair,
Yeah, and the crowd was as good as I have seen in that building in a long time. So I think the fact that the Falcons have won two, that people have talked about the atmosphere in that building against the Saints, and it is going to be a little bit of an alumni kind of homecoming game for the Falcons this weekend. I think you'll see the Falcons get a big energy boost from the crowd. I think they'll be able to get their run game, their offensive line going a little bit. And so I like Atlanta, still not like blowing the top off offensively, but maybe like 24-16. I could see the Bucs having the ball late, being down 8 or some kind of weird score where it's within a score and something kind of tight happening once again. But Atlanta, as they have a lot of times this season, kind of making maybe a defensive stop to get the ball back and win this game.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a close game. Not quite there at my score prediction yet, but I think it's going to be close. There's so much riding on the line for the Bucs, but Atlanta at home, the defense has played well. The Bucs defense has been, flip a coin. What are you getting each week? Especially if Vita's going to be out. Kind of want to definitely reserve until tomorrow till I know, because that's a huge factor, I think. Yeah. Also a huge factor for if McGarry can't go, because you guys don't have any good backup tackles. You barely have good tackles to begin with.
It could be such a ripple effect. Like, I think if Drew Dahlman is out and Vita Vea is in, Caleb McGarry being out, like, that's where you see if you're a running back and you got to pick up the blitz, right? And Vita Vea is just collapsing in the pocket from the inside. That's where you go. And so I could see Shaq Barrett having a pretty big game if Atlanta's missing its 2 offensive linemen. I mean, for sure.
So yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting no matter what, because there's a lot on the line for the Bucs. So there's going to be some hearts broken one way or the other. I think the hearts will be more broken if the Bucs lose, because I feel like the Falcons can afford a loss, because I don't see the Bucs sweeping the next 4 games after that. So that's going to do it. I'm appreciative that you came back on here this time. Last time you got the better. Hopefully I'll get the better end of it. It's always better covering a team once they win, but I won't be making the trip up there, so I won't be bumping into you. I chose Green Bay instead. Can you blame me?
I would do the exact same, man. That's going to be a really cool game.
Absolutely. It's supposed to snow Sunday morning too. So.
Oh wow. Yeah.
Extended weather forecast is saying the change, but but yeah. Thanks again for coming on. Thanks for chopping it up.
And, thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll have to do this again next year.
For sure.
All right. Talk to you later, man. That's going to do it here at Pirate Parlay. Breakdown of the Falcons. What's changed, what's new, injury report, all that stuff. If you guys just sink your teeth in. So we'll be back next week, hopefully with another player. I got a few more contacts this week, so we'll get somebody else in here, break it down, how their season's been going, get to know them a little bit more. But that's going to do it here, Pirate Parlay. I'm JC Allen, your host. Check out all my work at Sports Illustrated, Bucs Game Day. We got some awesome stuff going on over there, but that's it for me here at the Sick Podcast Network. I'm out of here. Peace.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast Pirate Parlay on YouTube, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.